Let's be honest, you've probably had a Facebook argument at some point in your life. Most of us have. But for one Dutch teenager, a simple argument online didn't end in an unfriending. It ended in her death. In 2012, a teenage feud on Facebook spilled over into the real world and became one of the most shocking murders the Netherlands has ever seen. This case became known as the Facebook murder, a chilling story of teenage jealousy, betrayal, and a hitman hired for just 50 euros. This is Murder on the Map, a series where I retell a true crime story from every country that I visited. And today's case takes place in the Netherlands. This is the story of the murder of Winsie Hau. I've spent quite a bit of time in the Netherlands, biking through peaceful neighborhoods, walking along calm canals, even visiting small towns like Arnhem that feel almost storybook quiet. It's the kind of place where you feel safe, where parents let their kids ride bikes freely, and where nothing bad truly seems like it could ever happen. And that's why this case is so haunting. Because behind that sense of safety, a teenage feud online ended in one of the most shocking murders the country has ever seen. Winsie Joyce Hau was born in 1996 as the only child to Chinese immigrant parents living in Arnhem, a quiet, green city in the eastern part of the Netherlands. Her parents worked long hours to give her opportunities they never had, and Winsie repaid them with gratitude and devotion. She was a caring daughter, often helping around the house and translating between Dutch and Chinese for her family. Her friends remembered her as cheerful, gentle, and almost effortlessly creative. She loved music, especially K-pop, and she was often seen with headphones draped around her neck. Her notebooks were filled with doodles and sketches, little bursts of imagination that she would share shyly if asked. She had a soft laugh that made people around her naturally relax, and an easy warmth that made her the kind of friend that everyone wanted to sit with at lunch. Winsie wasn't flashy or loud. She was steady, the one who would wait after class to help someone struggling with homework, or send a text to check in if she thought you seemed sad that day. She loved movies and fashion, sometimes borrowing ideas from magazines to put together her own unique outfits. At just 15 years old, she was beginning to step into her own identity. Smart, artistic, and kind-hearted. She dreamed of working in a creative field. Maybe design, maybe media, something where she could bring her imagination to life. Her world should have been all about school, friends, crushes, and future plans. But in January 2012, all of that promise was cut short in a way that nobody could have imagined. In 2011, Winsie got into a falling out with her best friend at the time, a 16-year-old girl named Polly. The two had been close, inseparable even, until October of that year, when everything unraveled during a birthday party at a pool hall in Arnhem. Something small sparked into an argument that night, but instead of separating, going their separate ways, and cooling off, the tension grew. Over the following weeks, their friendship deteriorated in the most public way possible. On Facebook. Posts turned into insults became accusations, and finally, Winsie made some comments online about Polly's alleged promiscuous behavior. That crossed a line for Polly, and turned what had started into innocent teenage drama into something much darker. Polly, who was furious and embarrassed at the comments Winsie had made about her online, didn't just want to win the argument anymore. To her, it was bigger than that. She asked her boyfriend, 17-year-old Wesley from Rotterdam, to deal with it. And Wesley, instead of calming her down and diffusing the situation, escalated it further. He reached out to another teenager, 14-year-old Jinhua from a nearby city, and offered him money to teach Winsie a lesson. If you remember those early Facebook days, you know just how messy things could get. Every status update felt like a public announcement. Every wall post was like airing dirty laundry. People would post cryptic statuses, and you just knew that it was aimed at someone. If you know, you know. I'll be real with you, I was obsessed with Facebook back in high school, and I can't tell you how much drama I got into in high school because of it. Screenshots, subtweet style posts, comment thread battles that went on for hours. It felt like the whole world was watching, when really it was just a few of our classmates. But for Winsie and Polly, this wasn't just silly teenage drama anymore. The insults turned into grudges, and the grudges turned into plans. And with Wesley and Jinhua now involved, the fight was about to spiral into something unthinkable. What happened next is the part that really makes this case feel so surreal. Because if you think back to being 15, having a fight with a friend felt like the biggest deal in the world. You'd obsess over every comment, every message, and most of the time it ended with someone crying in the bathroom or being blocked on social media for like a week. And that's where it should have stayed. But for Winsie's rival and her boyfriend, the anger didn't cool off. Instead, they started whispering about taking it further, not just hurting her feelings, but hurting her. And here's where it really gets crazy. They decided to outsource the violence. They didn't want to do it themselves, so they hired the third teenager, Jinhua, and offered him money to teach Winsie a lesson. Think about that for a second. 15-year-old drama online turning into a murder-for-hire plot. They promised him 100 euros, which is the equivalent of what most teens back then would spend on a phone upgrade or a weekend shopping trip. And for that price, the 14-year-old boy agreed to carry out an attack. On the night of January 14th, 2012, the plan unfolded. Jinhua went to Winsie's home in Arnhem, armed with a knife. He rang the doorbell. When Winsie opened the door, expecting a neighbor or a friend, he lunged forward and stabbed her repeatedly in the face and neck. Her father, 49-year-old Chen Hau, heard the screams and rushed to help Winsie. He tried to fight Jinhua off, but was slashed across the face and arms in the struggle. Bleeding and terrified, he managed to push back, but the damage was already done. Winsie was rushed to the hospital, gravely injured. For 5 days, doctors tried to save her, but on January 19th, 2012, Winsie Hau succumbed to her injuries. She was just 15 years old. A feud that started with Facebook comments had ended in a child's murder. Something that could have been any of us. Those dumb teenage fights that we thought were the end of the world became, for Winsie, the literal end of her world. The city of Arnhem was shaken to its core. Parents who had normally just been worried about their kids' grades or them coming home before curfew were suddenly asking, how could a teenage feud on Facebook end with a child being murdered in her own home? Police didn't waste any time. The 14-year-old boy who carried out the stabbings was caught within hours. He had blood on his clothes, and his story fell apart almost immediately. Under questioning, the truth came tumbling out. He wasn't acting alone. He hadn't even known Winsie. He had been sent. That's when investigators uncovered the horrifying twist. The mastermind behind this crime wasn't an older criminal or some adult with a grudge. It was another 15-year-old girl from Winsie's own social circle, the same girl that she had argued with on Facebook. Along with her 17-year-old boyfriend, they had orchestrated the entire thing. The boy admitted that they had approached him with an offer, cash in exchange for violence. But here's the detail that horrified the public the most. The price of Winsie Hau's life was reduced to mere pocket money. At first, they talked about paying him 100 euros, but in the end, it was just 50 euros, less than the cost of a video game, a pair of sneakers, or even a night out. Police quickly arrested the girl and her boyfriend. The town and the entire Netherlands watched in disbelief as the truth sank in. 3 teenagers, all under age 18, were at the center of one of the most shocking crimes in Dutch history. What had begun as gossip and insults online had escalated into a criminal, calculated murder-for-hire plot, planned in whispers, carried out in minutes, and devastating in consequences. The trial that followed was unlike anything the Netherlands had ever seen. In 2012, when the case entered the courtroom, the people were struck by the sight. Teenagers in hoodies and sneakers, sitting in the dock, accused of orchestrating a brutal, premeditated murder. The prosecution had laid out the chilling sequence of events. A petty feud on Facebook between Winsie Hau and another teenage girl, the insults that escalated, the boyfriend who encouraged revenge, and the boy they recruited, just 14 years old, who was offered 50 euros to carry out the killing. What shocked everyone was how clinical the plan was. The boyfriend had even messaged instructions telling the younger teen exactly when to strike, to wait until Winsie's parents were away, to make sure she was home alone. They weren't just caught up in the heat of teenage anger. They had plotted it and meticulously planned it all. In court, the 14-year-old confessed. He described how he had knocked on Winsie's door, walked inside inside and then stabbed her. When asked why he did this, he said simply, "Because they told me to." The girl and her boyfriend denied ordering a murder, but the digital evidence told another story. Chat logs, Facebook messages, and phone records painted a devastating picture of two teenagers who had turned petty spite into something fatal. Because all three suspects were under 18, Dutch law meant that they could not face life sentences. Instead, their punish reflected the limits of juvenile law. 14-year-old Jin Hua was sentenced to 1 year in a juvenile detention center and 3 years of compulsory psychiatric treatment. Polly and her boyfriend Wesley were each given 2 years in a juvenile detention center, plus 3 years of mandatory psychiatric care. This was the maximum sentence allowed for minors under Dutch criminal law. The prosecution had pushed for more and demanding the judge to give them at least 5 years each in prison, along with psychiatric treatment, but the judges ruled against it. For Winsie's family, those sentences seemed impossibly light. They had just lost their only daughter in the most senseless way imaginable, and the people responsible, kids the same age as Winsie, would one day get to walk free, while Winsie would never come back. After the sentencing, the courtroom emptied, but the shock lingered. The outcome sparked a national debate in the Netherlands. Many questioned whether juvenile sentencing laws were too lenient for crimes of this magnitude. How could a premeditated murder, a killing that was planned, organized, and executed, result in sentences of just a few years? For Winsie's grieving parents, these sentences felt like a second injustice, and their fears weren't unfounded. Psychologists who had treated Jin Hua during his time in a mental facility noticed that while he had shown some improvements, he still exhibited impulsive behavior, lowered empathy, and a lack of cooperation with interventions. But despite this, they assessed him as a low to moderate risk of reoffending and let him walk free once again. And in 2018, that risk became a reality. Jin Hua, who was now an adult, was arrested again, this time for an armed robbery. He and an older accomplice had posed as potential buyers for computer equipment that they saw posted online. Once inside the victim's home, they threatened to shoot the man, his girlfriend, and their infant child if they refused to cooperate, before him and his accomplice stole the computer equipment and fled the home. Police arrested the two just a few weeks later. When the news broke, Winsie's father said that he wasn't surprised. "He is severely disturbed. That was evident from Winsie's murder," he told reporters. Today in Arnhem, people still remember Winsie as the bright girl whose life was cut short by senseless violence. For her parents, the grief is unending. Their only daughter was not lost to illness, not to a freak accident, or even natural causes, but to a feud typed out in Facebook posts that spiraled into real-world horror. And for the rest of us, Winsie Hau's story is a stark reminder. Words online can become weapons, and sometimes the cost of a feud is a life. This is Murder on the Map, and this was the story of Winsie Hau and the Facebook murder of the Netherlands.